The last time I was standing on a conference stage was over 2 years ago on NG China in November. You have no idea how much excited I am to be here today in front of a huge audience and my hometown Israeli audience and Israeli community. So thank you everybody to being here today with me. Round of applause for you. And today we're going to talk about the newest trend in the Angular community. You probably heard about it. I know that Maxim mentioned it. I think it's the most requested improvement for the platform that finally got addressed. It's standalone components. So about myself, I'm the founder and CEO of eSquare. It's a consulting firm in the Israeli market. I'm Google developer expert. I'm a writer in Angular in depth and one of the Israeli community leaders. eSquare, today we are the biggest consulting firm in Israel that focused on Angular. I'm always happy to see more tech giants join our customer list. And of course, I'm always happy to see you here today with us and in our meetups. We have a meetup that's called Angular TLV. You can follow us on meetup.com. And of course, there's everybody. We're also hiring. So if you want to work with me, send an email or catch up with me later. Once upon pre-COVID, this talk story actually starts 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, I think. It was June, and we hosted Rob Wormald for the last version of in-person of AngularUP. And Rob had an extra day. Rob, by the way, was in the core team of Angular. And apparently under his hotel was the gay parade. And we both, and Craig, we went to the gay parade. And we sat on the grass, drink some beers, and Rob tell us all the secrets about what's coming up next in Angular and their idea of how they're going to change Angular. He mentioned a lot of great ideas that coming out from React, like React DOM.render. If anybody, by the way, working with React? Hey, don't go nobody. I'm also doing some React, I have to admit. So the idea was to take Angular and make it easier and learn some the good stuff from React. And I remember myself sitting there together with him and writing note to myself about what's coming up next in Angular. And I created this, I think in August in Berlin. I called this talk Bye Bye NgModules, and I introduced the community with the idea of going fully zoneless with optional NgModules. Then I felt it sounded too noisy, and also I thought that the idea is not just about NgModules or making NgModules optionals. So I changed the name of it to The Future of Standalone Components in the Post-Ivy Days. I posted this blog post around 2019, in around September. And I think at that moment I thought that it's going to be the most significant change that coming up to the network, to the framework once that Ivy going to be land. This talk and blog post had tens of thousands of views, and developers from the community reach out to me. I remember my Twitter getting messages on a daily basis, and even though I told everybody that everything I'm talking about is experimental, I remember people asking me for help in production with standalone components and functions that prefix with data sign. I think that everybody was excited about what's coming up next to Angular and how Angular is going to be changed. And a few weeks ago, I think 3 weeks ago, finally, after 2.5 years from that talk, the core team published this RFC, Standalone Components, Directives and Pipes, and how to make Angular's NgModules optionals. It's official one by the core team, and it's about to get released in the next few versions, not in the next version that got released a few days ago. But before we're going into a deep dive on this RFC and what's coming up next to Angular, I think that let's explain what the heck are standalone components. Let's take this simple example of having one component. In our case, counter component with a plus, and that can indicate, you can increase the counter, decrease the counter, and show the current value of the counter. Now, how are we going to use it? We probably have the selector, and we present it by using the HTML tag, right? The thing is, in Angular, it's not that easy. Now, to use the counter component, I probably have to create a module, right? Somebody using the scam pattern, single Angular components module? Yeah? No? Nobody? You have no idea what I'm talking about? Okay. So in order to use the counter component, I probably have to wrap it inside my common module. Probably have to use the common module inside the counter module. I have to export, declare it, and also export it, right? Now, next, or I have to bootstrap my own module, or I can import it in another module. Let's say app module, and I can import counter module, and then I'm ready to go. The following can found in the Angular IO docs. A component must belong to an NgModule. And NgModule for me is way more than just a simple component. Modules has injectors, they have DI, they have providers. You're declaring a lot of things inside a module. Module is not just a component. And for me, and not only for me, NgModules represents applications. The whole idea is we're trying to separate the ideas of applications and components, and we want to have the ability to render one standalone component without being tied to any application, right? So the promise around IO was to expose a function that we'll call render component. Now it's still prefixed with theta because it's private function, but that was the promise around Ivy. Now the motivation is clear. At least I hope the motivation is clear. Currently, NgModules, which is a core concept in Angular, is acting like it's taking a key part of reasoning and reusing of components. Today, library is publishing NgModules, and today all the lazy loading inside Angular is centered around the idea of having NgModules. The thing is, it's hard to reason about components, directives, and pipes in isolations. They have to be tied to modules today. Let's take another example, dynamic components. Let's have a look on this component. We have one component that's called dynamic user view component. It injects, render another component that's called user view component, and it's doing dynamically just after an event. If we take a look on user view component, the component that rendered dynamically, we can see that this component has another dependency. It injects a service that's called user view service. And this service is provided only in the module level. The problem is that if the component that renders dynamically, this component, not importing this module, we're gonna have a runtime error. Because we need this dependency of this provider that's called user view service, but we don't have it. You know what? Maybe the key thing here is that makes actually the way of rendering components dynamically. We actually can do it in a safe way. So we understand that components needs modules, right? But we also understand that the current state causes some problems. The API for rendering a component is unnecessarily complex. Today you're using bootstrap module just to render one component. And it's easy to misuse. How many of you use the view container ref, create components to create components dynamically without really understand what it actually is doing under the hood? Moreover, if you take a look inside one component, you probably can't really understand what's the component doing without taking a look or what's the component behavior without taking a look on the module. Because some of the code or some of the logic is sitting inside the module. And again, we can't think about components in isolations. So what's the goal? The main goal is to move Angular in a direction where components, directives, and pipes are playing more central role. They are self-contained, and they can be safely imported and used directly. And other goals? Simplify the mental model of Angular. For example, how many of you think that Angular today is easy for newcomers? So, my man. And make new APIs for using components direct if possible. How we're going to render components in a lazy way. And of course, improving the ability of Angular tooling to process code efficiently. Now, let's go to the how they're going to change it. So the change is going to be under the hood, or not under the hood, because you need to do something in order to make it work. But I want to present what's actually going to be changed. And you probably can see a change in the metadata of components. By the way, you see the change? Yeah, standalone true. So I didn't invent this. I actually stole it from the Angular core team. And you know what? Let's go to a short live coding example of how it's going to look like. So I have here a basic application, okay? It's already running, currently doing nothing. It's not an Angular application, it's just a Webpack starter, okay? And as you can see, I have no Angular JSON here. I have a main TS that bootstrap one module, okay? I have all the dependencies of Angular here. You can check my package JSON to see that I'm actually have Angular core here, Angular common, those kind of stuff. I'm bootstrapping app module, and of course inside app module I'm bootstrapping app component, and app component currently is empty. You can see index.html currently have this app component and everything works as you might know. The only thing that changes, that is different in this project, is that I stole one file from the Angular team that's called Standalone shim.ts, okay? And this file is actually taking those component decorators, and not only component decorators, taking the Angular decorator, the regular one that you already know, and extending them. For example, if you take a look on function component, you can see that I have everything here, but I'm also extending it to have this standalone true. So I have this metadata. It's doing a lot of things under the hood. We're not going to dive into it. If you want, by the way, catch me outside after the talk, and we can definitely go of how actually those things works, okay? There is things that called the virtual module, but let's don't dive to this because we don't have a lot of time. So let's start from the basic example. I will create standalone components, standalone component TS, and instead of using the regular component, I'm import it from the standalone shim. I'm not from Angular core. Okay. Now, yeah, of course. There you go. Better. Awesome. Now, if you take a look, I have something that's called standalone that I can set to true, and let's take a selector. Let's call it standalone component, and in the template let's do an easy counter. Export class my standalone component. Let's create counter and initiate to 0 with the plus function, and this counter plus plus. Okay. And here counter is counter with a button that's going to increase the counter. Click. Awesome. Now, the difference is I'm not going to declare this standalone component. I'm going to import it like it's act as a module. So let's import my standalone component, but I'm going to use its module. By the way, it doesn't mean that in the end it's going to look like that. Currently it's part of the RFC, and to make this demo work, don't take everything that I'm saying today and do it tomorrow in your production applications. Okay? So now I can go to my app component and of course take this selector and present our first standalone component. And we have, let's add here some text. And we have our first standalone component. Woo! Amazing. Let's make it a bit more complex. So I'm going to add an input, okay? And who loves banana in the box? Huh? Let's add a banana in the box, NgModule. And let's bind it to name. And, I'm missing one right there. And name is name. Name equal Eliran. All right. Can you see the arrow? What's the problem? Huh? Forms module. I'm missing more forms module, but I'm in a standalone component. What can I do? Imports inside the component, not in any other module. I'm adding the forms module from Angular core, and that's about it. And that's about it. I have, guys, I have this simple Angular component without being tied to any module. Let's make it a bit more complex. Let's say that we have another standalone component that we want to present in this standalone component. How are we going to do this? So I'm creating another one, another component. Yes, again, component from standalone shim. Now, standalone, true, selector, another standalone component, and template. I'm another standalone component. Export class, another standalone component. שכחתי גרש. That's it. And now, let's say that I want to take this selector and presented it inside this standalone component. What's going to happen? Error. Why error? So template error parse, another standalone component is non-element. What should I do? Declare import. Import. We are in a standalone component world, so I'm taking the another standalone component, refreshing, and I have another standalone component. Super cool. Now, I don't have a lot of time and I have a lot of things to show you. Now, let's create a module, okay? Let's talk about providers. We all know, guys, I know that this is exciting, but let's try to focus. Let's talk about providers. Today, we definitely can provide providers or declare providers inside the component, right? You can take any component with the current component decorator and declare any providers that you like. But let's say that I have a module, okay? Let's create another module. Let's call it a locale module. Let's create an NgModule, okay? Let's call it export class locale module. And you know what, let's also create an injection token, export const locale, that it's going to be a new injection token of string array, and locale, okay? And now let's provide this locale inside this module. So I'm going to add a providers array. Inside the providers, I'm going to provide locale, not this locale. Locale, thank you VS Code for the fadiha. Use value en, for example, and multi-true, right? Because now you will understand why we have a multi-true. Let's create another one with UK, for example, okay? And let's say that now our standalone components wants to import this locale. So I'm importing this one, right? And now let's add a constructor here, and I will inject. By the way, I'm using the decorator inject because we are not in an Angular project and we don't really have the DI system here. So I'm using the @inject to take the token. What's the token? Token is locale, right? Let's also import this one, and protected locales string array. Now let's present them on the screen. So let's say we have an unordered list, and we want to present with ng4 let locale of locales, and let's print the locale. Cool? Error. What's the problem? ng4 off. What, we don't have ng4? It's coming out of the common module, and our component is not tied to anything. So I can just import the common module from Angular core, refresh, and I have it. By the way, if you're curious if the DI level is top in the standalone component level, the answer is no. We can go to our app module, add the provider, and also provide locale, use value fr, okay, let's add another one, multi-true, and the import is not correct. No, it's VS Code, it's not me. And we have a file. So that means that the injector root is not stops in the standalone component level, it's climbed up to the app level. Awesome. Let's take directives, for example, okay? I don't have a lot of time, let's do it quickly. So directive, standalone directive TS. How directive is gonna work? Exactly the same. So I can create a directive, standalone true, selector, let's call it standalone directive, and here let's just change the host to have style, border 3 pixel solid red, okay? Export class, standalone directive, or my standalone directive, so it's going to be cleared. Let's add it to our app module, and inside our app component, let's add another div that will actually use this standalone directive. So let's add, I'm using the standalone directive, and standalone directive. Woo! Where the directive? Pipes? Yeah, now let's do pipe. So I'm adding a standalone pipe, yes, pipe with standalone true, name going to be standalone pipe, export class my standalone pipe, and it implements the pipe transformer, of course. Let's say that the value is always going to be a string, and let's return the value to uppercase. Okay? Let's use this pipe. So first, let's going to add it to the imports array as a module. And inside our standalone component, I can add another div, which going to have this, no way, standalone pipe, okay, and standalone pipe. Let's see it. What's the selector name? Conventions. And now it's uppercase. Last example, I promise. But Gil, I have 5 minutes. Last example, a quick one, okay? Lazy loading of components and dynamic rendering of components. Shh, guys, be with me. Last example, so let's add inside our app component a constructor, and I will inject two things, okay? I will inject the view container app, private VCR, and of course inject view container F, or a VCR of type view container F, and let's inject also the component factory resolver, private factory resolver. I will create another view container F, by the way, that it's part of the shim file. So vcref shim of type vcref shim, okay? And inside the constructor, when I'm going to have everything, I'm going to just initiate this VCR shim to be a new view container F shim that use the VCR and the component factory resolver. And let's say that we have a load component function. Let's say a button that on click going to load the component, load component, awesome. Now I'm going to load this component. I can just use a new API that we're going to have inside the view container F, create components that can just take my standalone component and render it on the screen, okay? But I have another option, which is almost be better. I can create the import statement to take it from the file itself, path to the file, okay? Then I know that I'm going to create, to get a component, and now I can tell the VCR shim to create component. What's the difference gonna be? Lazy loading of components, okay? In the days of view container in the days of standalone components. Let's go back to our slides. Well, no, second. Summary, before we go, what we should take out of this one. Angular is changing. It's moving to be more linear and more simpler, and it's tending to welcome more newcomers. It's going to be more easy to learn Angular. NgModules are not gone. They're not going to be replaced in the next even few versions, but in the future you will probably see less and less NgModules. And they probably are going to be optional from version 14, but not before that. In this version, standalone components are still zone full. Okay, so don't expect any zoneless components, but more changes are coming. Keep in touch with me. This is my Twitter handle and email. I have a website that's called eliassy.dev that you can catch up with me there. Catch me out here during the break, and thank you very much